The red dust of Mars swirled around the dome of Research Station Alpha as Dr. Thomas Reed stared at his computer screen for the 100th time that day. His eyes were tired, but he couldn't look away from the strange readings that kept appearing on his monitor. The quantum energy patterns he was detecting from the ancient ruins simply didn't make sense. Dr. Reed. The voice of Research Director Alice Morgan crackled through his communicator. The night shift is about to start. You should get some rest. Just 5 more minutes, he replied, his fingers dancing across the holographic keyboard. There's something odd about these readings. They don't match any known energy signature in our database. The year was 2157, and humanity had established several research bases on Mars. Station Alpha sat next to what they initially thought was just another rocky hill, until ground-penetrating radar revealed it to be an artificial structure buried under millions of years of dust. Thomas rubbed his eyes and reached for his coffee mug, only to find it empty. The quantum scanner continued to ping, its steady rhythm broken by occasional spikes that shouldn't be possible according to every physics textbook he'd ever read. A gentle vibration shook the floor. Thomas looked up from his screen to see Director Morgan entering his lab, her boots leaving red footprints on the white floor. "I knew you wouldn't listen," she said with a small smile. "What's got you so excited?" Thomas pointed to his screen. "Look at these patterns. They're repeating every 12.7 seconds, but that's not the strange part." He pulled up another window showing a series of complex equations. These energy signatures match theoretical calculations about dimensional manipulation that we thought were impossible. Alice leaned closer, her eyes widening. "That can't be right. Those theories were disproven decades ago." "That's what everyone thought." Thomas stood up and walked to the wall-sized map of the dig site. But what if they weren't wrong? What if they just didn't have the right conditions to prove them? The next morning, Thomas led a team of researchers to the excavation site. The Martian sun cast long shadows across the dig as they carefully removed layer after layer of compacted soil. Their laser drills hummed quietly, cutting through the ancient rock with precision. "Stop," Thomas called out suddenly. The drilling team froze. "Look at this." He brushed away some dust with his gloved hand, revealing a metallic surface that seemed to shimmer despite the lack of light. Within hours, they had uncovered what appeared to be a door. A massive panel covered in markings unlike anything they had seen before. But it wasn't the door that made their hearts race. It was the warning symbols etched into its surface. They were in different styles, different patterns, clearly made by different species at different times. Yet they all seemed to be saying the same thing. "We need a linguistics team here now," Alice ordered through her comm unit. As she spoke, Thomas noticed something else. The quantum scanner in his hand was going crazy, its readings off the charts. The discovery sparked a frenzy of activity. More researchers arrived from other stations, and soon the site was buzzing with equipment and excited chatter. As they worked to decode the messages, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something momentous. Late that night, as the first translations began coming in, Thomas sat in his lab reading the preliminary reports. The messages were warnings, serious ones. They spoke of power beyond imagination, of energy that could reshape reality itself. And they all mentioned beings called the Progenitors, an ancient species that had apparently ruled the galaxy long ago. But it was the last decoded message that made Thomas's blood run cold. Unlike the others, this one wasn't just a warning. It was a prediction. Those who share our form but not our limits will one day find this vault. To them, we leave our legacy and our burden. May they succeed where we failed. As Thomas stared at those words, a new alert popped up on his screen. The energy readings from the vault were changing. Something was waking up, responding to their presence in ways the progenitors had never anticipated. Humanity's greatest discovery, and perhaps its greatest challenge, was about to begin. News of the discovery spread through the research stations on Mars like wildfire. Within days, the best linguists and archaeologists from Earth had arrived at Station Alpha. their ships leaving trails of fire across the red planet's sky. Dr. Thomas Reed hadn't slept properly in 3 days. He sat in the main conference room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the various alien scripts from the vault door. Director Alice Morgan stood at the front of the room, addressing the gathered scientists. "The translations are clear," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "This vault was sealed by beings known as the Progenitors over 50,000 years ago. They were the first advanced civilization in our galaxy, and they left these warnings for a reason." The room's air felt heavy. On the main screen, images of the translated texts scrolled past. One of the linguists, Dr. James Walker, stood up and pointed to a particular section. "This part is fascinating," he said. "The Progenitors didn't just seal away a power source. They sealed away what they called the key to reality itself. But here's the interesting part. They couldn't control it properly." Thomas leaned forward in his chair. The quantum readings from his instruments had grown stronger each day, pulsing in patterns that seemed almost alive. He pulled up his latest data on his tablet. "Look at this," he said, sending the display to the main screen. The energy patterns we're detecting. They're responding to human brainwave frequencies. It's like the vault is reaching out to us specifically. Alice walked over to examine his findings. "What do you mean, specifically to us?" Thomas pulled up another chart. Every species mentioned in the warnings, including the Progenitors, they all had different neural patterns from humans. Our brains work differently. We process information in a unique way. The revelation sent murmurs through the room. Dr. Walker pulled up more translations, his eyes wide with excitement. "That matches what we're finding in the texts. The Progenitors tried to harness this energy, but it was too chaotic, too unpredictable. They couldn't maintain stable control." Just then, the vault's energy readings spiked dramatically. Everyone's tablets lit up with alerts. Thomas rushed to the observation window overlooking the excavation site. The metallic surface of the vault door had begun to glow with a soft blue light. "It's never done that before," Alice whispered, standing beside him. The science team scrambled to their monitoring stations. Data poured in as the vault's energy signature grew stronger. But instead of the chaotic patterns described in the Progenitors' warnings, these readings were surprisingly stable. "Look at this," Thomas called out, pointing to his screen. "The energy. It's synchronizing with human brainwave patterns. It's like it's trying to communicate." Dr. Walker rushed over with a new translation. "This changes everything," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. "According to this section, the Progenitors predicted that someday, a species with minds unfettered by ancient limits would find this vault. They left it for us, for whoever could actually control it." The room erupted in excited discussion, but Alice raised her hand for silence. "We need to be careful," she said. "The Progenitors were advanced beyond our understanding. If they feared this power enough to lock it away, we need to respect that." Thomas nodded, but couldn't hide his enthusiasm. "Yes, but they also left it here, protected it, preserved it for eons. They wanted it to be found by the right species." As if in response to his words, the vault's glow intensified. New symbols began appearing on its surface, different from the warnings. "These were instructions. They're not just warnings," Dr. Walker said, quickly translating the new text. "They're tests. The Progenitors created trials to prove if a species was ready for this power." Alice looked at the assembled team, her expression serious. "Then we better make sure we're ready. Humanity's future might depend on how we handle what's in that vault." Thomas stared at the glowing doorway, its light reflecting in his eyes. The energy readings continued to pulse in perfect harmony with human neural patterns. Whatever the Progenitors had sealed away, it had been waiting for humanity all along. The real question was, were they truly ready to claim this inheritance? The first sign of trouble came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Europa. 3 massive objects had appeared just beyond Neptune's orbit, their energy signatures unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The objects were moving fast, headed straight for Mars. In Research Station Alpha, Dr. Thomas Reed was working with his team on decoding the vault's trials when the emergency alert flashed across all screens. Director Alice Morgan burst into the lab, her face pale. "We need to evacuate now," she said. "Something's coming." Thomas looked up from the vault's glowing surface. "We can't leave," he protested. "We're so close to understanding the first trial. The energy patterns are starting to make sense." "This isn't a debate," Alice replied, showing him her tablet. On the screen, 3 massive ships, each larger than Earth's biggest city, were decelerating into the solar system. These vessels, they're using technology similar to what we detected in the vault. The evacuation alarm blared through the station. Scientists rushed to secure their data while security teams took up defensive positions. But before anyone could reach the emergency shuttles, it happened. A beam of light appeared in the center of the main research hall. It expanded into a perfect circle, and through it stepped beings that looked almost human, but not quite. They were tall, their skin had a slight metallic sheen, and their eyes glowed with an inner light. "We are the Watchers," the leader announced in perfect English, their voice resonating with power. "We are the guardians appointed by the progenitors. You will cease your interference with the vault immediately." President Marcus Stone's hologram appeared in the hall. The Earth government had been monitoring the situation and had prepared for this moment. "I am the leader of humanity's united government," he said calmly. "We mean no harm. We are merely exploring and learning." The Watcher leader's eyes narrowed. "You do not understand what you meddle with. The power within that vault was sealed away for the good of all life in this galaxy. The progenitor's decision is final." But Thomas noticed something odd. The vault's energy readings were spiking again, but this time they were forming patterns he recognized from their research. Without warning, he stepped forward. "The trials," he said loudly. "The progenitors left trials, not just warnings. Why would they do that if they never meant for anyone to access this power?" The Watchers stirred uneasily. Their leader turned to Thomas, studying him intently. You've begun to understand the patterns." "Yes," Thomas replied. "And the energy responds to us differently than it did to the progenitors. You can see it in your own readings, can't you?" Alice stepped forward with her tablet, displaying the synchronized wave patterns between human brainwaves and the vault's energy. The Watchers gathered around, their expressions showing surprise and concern. "Impossible," one of them whispered. "The patterns are stable. Even the progenitors never achieved such harmony." The lead Watcher raised a hand for silence. "It changes nothing. Our duty is clear. You will withdraw from this facility, or we will remove you by force. The ships in orbit stand ready." President Stone's hologram straightened. "We cannot abandon this discovery. Humanity has always pushed the boundaries of knowledge. If we are capable of understanding and controlling this power, don't we have a responsibility to try?" "You speak of responsibility," the Watcher scoffed. "Your species is barely out of its cradle. You cannot comprehend the forces you might unleash." But at that moment, the vault pulsed with brilliant light. New symbols appeared on its surface, and Dr. Walker, who had been quietly translating, suddenly spoke up. "These are new," he said excitedly. "The vault. It's responding to our defense of humanity's right to learn. This is part of the trial." The Watchers stepped back, clearly disturbed. Their leader's confident expression wavered for the first time. What they had thought would be a simple mission of enforcement had become something far more complex. Humanity wasn't just defiant. They were doing something that should have been impossible. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the galaxy forever. The only question was, would it be resolved through wisdom or through force? The ice caves of Europa echoed with the hum of hidden machinery. After the confrontation with the Watchers, humanity had agreed to pause their Mars research. What they didn't mention was the secret facility they'd already built beneath Europa's frozen surface. Dr. Thomas Reed stood in the main research chamber, surrounded by equipment evacuated from Mars. The vault's outer panel lay before him, still pulsing with its mysterious blue light. Director Alice Morgan watched from the observation deck above, monitoring the energy readings. "Ready for another attempt?" she asked through the intercom. Thomas nodded, placing his hands on the vault panel. "The patterns are becoming clearer each time. It's like learning a new language, but with pure energy." The room dimmed as power flowed into the testing chamber. For weeks, they had been recreating the vault's energy signature, trying to understand how it responded to human consciousness. Each attempt brought them closer to breakthrough. "Energy levels stable," called out one of the technicians. "Neural synchronization at 85% and climbing." Thomas closed his eyes, focusing on the patterns he'd memorized from countless hours of study. The energy felt different this time, less like a force they were trying to control, and more like a conversation between equals. Suddenly, the blue light intensified. Everyone in the room gasped as the energy formed shapes in the air, perfect geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could see. "It's working," Thomas called out, his voice filled with excitement. "The patterns, they're not just energy signatures. They're thoughts. The progenitors found a way to turn consciousness itself into energy." Alice rushed down to the main floor, her tablet displaying readings that should have been impossible. "The power isn't just responding to you anymore," she said. "It's resonating, amplifying your thoughts." Thomas opened his eyes, which now had a faint blue glow. He raised his hand, and a portion of the air in front of him folded like paper, creating a window through space itself. Through it, they could see the surface of Mars, thousands of miles away. "That's why the progenitors could never fully control it," he said softly. "They tried to treat it like a tool, a power source to be dominated. But it's more than that. It's a bridge between thought and reality." The security team stepped forward nervously, but Alice waved them back. She had seen enough to know this wasn't dangerous. It was revolutionary. "Can you control it?" she asked. Thomas nodded, closing the spatial window with a thought. "It's not about control, really. It's about harmony. The human brain is uniquely suited to having a conversation with reality itself." One of the younger scientists raised her hand excitedly. "That's what the Vault's trials were testing. Not our power or technology, but our ability to understand and connect." Just then, alarms blared throughout the facility. On the main screen, sensors showed 3 Watcher ships approaching Jupiter. They had discovered the secret base. "They're coming," Alice said grimly. "And this time, they won't just ask us to stop." But Thomas smiled, his eyes still glowing with that strange blue light. "Let them come. We're ready now. Humanity has found what the progenitors hoped we would, not just the power, but the understanding to use it wisely." Around him, other scientists stepped forward, ready to learn what he had discovered. The energy responded to each of them differently, but always in harmony. Where the progenitors had sought to dominate this force, humanity had learned to dance with it. As the Watcher ships drew closer, Thomas knew that everything was about to change. Humanity hadn't just unlocked a new power source. They had discovered a new way of existing within reality itself. The real question was, how would they use this knowledge when the confrontation came? The answer would shake the foundations of the galaxy. Earth's orbital defense grid lit up with warnings as the Watcher fleet emerged from hyperspace. Their massive ships cast shadows over entire cities, their hulls gleaming with ancient power, but humanity was ready for them this time. In the command center of Earth's primary defense station, President Marcus Stone stood with military leaders, watching as humanity's own ships moved into position. Each vessel now carried technology developed from Thomas's breakthrough on Europa. "They're broadcasting a message," announced the communications officer. "Playing it now." The Watcher Prime's image appeared on the main screen, their metallic skin reflecting starlight. "This is your final warning. Surrender your research and submit to our authority, or we will be forced to take action." President Stone straightened his back. "We know why you're really here," he replied calmly. "You're not protecting the galaxy. You're protecting your power over it. The first shots came without warning. Beams of energy lanced out from the Watcher ships, aimed at Earth's orbital platforms, but instead of destroying them, the attack simply stopped, frozen in space. In the Europa facility, Dr. Thomas Reed stood with dozens of other scientists, their eyes glowing with blue light as they worked in perfect harmony with the energy they had mastered. Through their combined consciousness, they held the Watcher's attack at bay. Impossible. The Watcher Prime's voice boomed across all channels. No species has ever. Their words cut off as humanity's ships began to move. These weren't the clunky vessels of a few months ago. They flowed like liquid metal, shifting and changing as their crews fought them into new forms. Reality itself bent around them, guided by human minds working in perfect sync with the universe. Director Alice Morgan's voice came through the command center speakers from Europa. Thomas was right, she said. The power isn't about dominance, it's about harmony. And humans, we've spent our entire history learning to adapt, to work together, to see new possibilities. The battle unfolded like a dance, where the Watchers tried to use brute force. Humanity's ships flowed like water around their attacks. Where they attempted to disrupt Earth's defenses, human consciousness simply rewrote the local laws of physics. You don't understand what you're doing, the Watcher Prime shouted, real fear in their voice now. This power, it changed the progenitors, made them mad with possibilities. Thomas's voice answered them, broadcasted from Europa. No, it didn't drive them mad. It showed them a truth they couldn't accept, that they weren't meant to be the final word in evolution, that something new could surpass them. As if to prove his point, a group of human ships merged into a single form, creating a structure that existed in more dimensions than the eye could see. It moved through space like a thought, appearing simultaneously at multiple points around the Watcher fleet. Look at your own readings, Thomas continued. Your weapons can't harm us because we're not fighting you. We're working with reality itself, not trying to force it to obey us. The Watcher ships began to retreat, their mighty weapons useless against humanity's newfound harmony with the universe. But before they could flee, something unexpected happened. One of the younger Watchers stepped forward, their image replacing their leaders on the screens. He's right, they said. I can see it in their energy patterns. They're not corrupted by the power. They're evolving with it. The battle paused as confusion spread through the Watcher fleet. More of their kind began to speak up, their centuries of certainty crumbling in the face of what they were witnessing. President Stone seized the moment. We don't want to fight you, he said. We want to share what we've learned. The progenitors were wrong. This power wasn't meant to be sealed away. It was meant to help life grow, to help consciousness evolve. As the Earth's sun rose over the planet's edge, humanity stood ready, not to win a war, but to help the galaxy take its next step forward. The real question was, would the Watchers choose to take that step with them? The great hall of the Watchers' command ship hung silent as the holographic records played out before them. After the battle, a group of younger Watchers had broken ranks, inviting human representatives aboard to share what they had discovered. Dr. Thomas Reed stood with Director Alice Morgan and President Stone, their eyes fixed on the ancient recordings. The images showed the progenitors at the height of their power, but something was wrong. The supposedly benevolent ancient race looked afraid. These are the sealed archives, said Guardian Mentor, the young Watcher who had spoken up during the battle. Records that even most Watchers were never allowed to see. In the hologram, a progenitor leader spoke to a vast assembly. The power grows beyond our control, not because it is dangerous, but because it seeks those more worthy than us. We must seal it away, or our dominion will end. Alice stepped forward, her hand passing through the light of another recording. They weren't protecting the galaxy, she said softly. They were protecting their own supremacy. More recordings played, showing the truth behind the great warnings. The progenitors had discovered the consciousness-based energy, but could never fully master it. Their rigid, hierarchical minds couldn't achieve the harmony humans have found naturally. Our entire purpose, Guardian Mentor's voice shook. Everything we were taught about protecting the galaxy from this power. It was all a lie. Thomas shook his head. Not a lie. A misunderstanding. The progenitors couldn't imagine that evolution would produce something beyond them. But that's exactly what they feared. And what happened? President Stone watched as more records revealed themselves. They sealed away the power not because it was corrupt, but because it showed them their own limitations. They couldn't accept that younger races might surpass them. The archives continued to play, showing how the progenitors had created the Watchers, programming them with false warnings and a mission to prevent anyone from accessing the power. But they had made one crucial mistake. "Look at this," Thomas said, pointing to a data stream. The vault wasn't just a prison for the power. It was an incubator, waiting for a species with the right kind of consciousness to find it. In the center of the hall, a new hologram formed, a complete map of the galaxy. Dots of light began to appear, showing similar vaults on thousands of worlds. "There are more?" Alice asked, her eyes wide. Guardian Mentor nodded. "The progenitors built them everywhere, each containing a fraction of the power. We thought we were protecting the galaxy by keeping them sealed. But what if? What if we were really just holding back the next step in cosmic evolution?" Finished another Watcher, stepping forward. Around the hall, more Watchers began to move closer, their ancient certainty crumbling in the face of undeniable truth. Thomas raised his hand, letting the familiar blue energy flow around him. "The power doesn't corrupt or destroy," he said. "It evolves, it adapts, it seeks harmony with consciousness itself. That's why humans can use it so naturally. We've spent our entire history adapting, changing, working together to overcome our limitations." The Watcher Prime, who had been silent until now, stepped into the center of the hall. "If what you say is true," they said slowly, "then our entire purpose must change. But how can we be sure this power won't lead to chaos?" President Stone smiled. "Because we'll face it together. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We want to help it grow. To help all species reach their full potential." Around them, the ancient records continued to play. But their warnings now seemed hollow. The truth had been revealed. The power wasn't a danger to be contained, but a gift to be shared. The only question remaining was, how would they use this knowledge to reshape the galaxy's future? 5 years after the revelation of the progenitors' true motives, the galaxy had changed more than anyone could have imagined. The great spire of the Galactic Academy of Dimensional Sciences rose from the surface of Europa, its crystalline towers shimmering with the same blue energy that had started everything. Dr. Thomas Reed stood at the window of his office, watching as ships from a dozen different species arrived for the latest graduation ceremony. Below, in the main courtyard, humans walked alongside reformed Watchers and representatives from younger civilizations, all of them learning to harness the power that had once been forbidden. "Ready for the ceremony?" Director Alice Morgan asked, entering his office. After all these years, she still maintained her role as his voice of reason and guidance. Thomas smiled, turning from the window. "Hard to believe how far we've come. Remember when we thought we were just studying some strange energy readings on Mars?" They walked together through the Academy's halls, passing classrooms where students learned to harmonize their consciousness with the universe itself. In one room, a young Watcher taught alongside a human instructor, showing a class how to create stable dimensional bridges. In another, representatives from a newly discovered civilization were learning their first lessons in energy manipulation. "Guardian Mentor's ship just arrived," Alice said, checking her communicator. The former young Watcher had become one of their strongest allies, helping to transform the Watchers from guardians of stagnation into teachers of growth. The main auditorium was packed with beings from across the galaxy. President Stone, now serving as the head of the United Galactic Council, stood at the podium. The blue energy flowed freely here, shaped by hundreds of minds working in perfect harmony. 5 years ago, Stone began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. We discovered something that changed everything. Not just a source of power, but a new way of existing within our universe. Today, we celebrate another class of graduates who will help spread this knowledge further. Thomas watched as students from Earth, former Watcher worlds, and newly contacted civilizations walked across the stage. Each demonstrated their unique way of working with the energy, showing how different species brought their own perspectives to its use. The progenitors were wrong, Stone continued. They thought this power would bring chaos. Instead, it has brought unity. Not through force or dominance, but through understanding and growth. Alice leaned over to Thomas. "Look," she whispered, pointing to a group of beings entering the back of the auditorium. They were unlike any species yet encountered, clearly from one of the farthest reaches of the galaxy, drawn by word of what Earth had started. As the ceremony continued, Thomas reflected on their journey. The power they had discovered hadn't just changed humanity. It had changed what was possible for all life in the galaxy. Every species that learned to work with it brought new insights, new applications, new ways of understanding reality itself. Later, standing in the Academy's great observatory, Thomas watched the stars with Guardian Mentor. The galaxy seemed brighter somehow, more alive with possibility. "We've found 3 more vaults this month alone," Guardian Mentor said, each one responding to the species nearest to it, waiting for them to be ready. Thomas nodded, just as the progenitors never intended. They thought they were hiding away a dangerous power, but they were really planting seeds for the future. Alice joined them, carrying new data from the latest explorations. "The younger races are advancing faster than we ever expected. Working together, sharing knowledge. It's like the whole galaxy is waking up." Through the observatory's dome, they could see ships moving between the stars, carrying teachers and students to new worlds. The blue energy that had once been sealed away now flowed freely, connecting civilizations and opening doors to possibilities that even the progenitors had never imagined. "So," Guardian Mentor asked with a smile, "what do you think we'll discover next?" Thomas looked out at the endless stars, each one potentially holding new life, new consciousness, new ways of understanding the power they had unleashed. "That's the best part," he replied. "We'll find out together." And in the vast expanse of space, countless civilizations looked up at their own skies, ready to take their next step into a future that humanity had helped create, a future where no power was forbidden, and every species had the chance to reach its full potential.